Hi guys, welcome back. This is the last video of our HTML, CSS and JavaScript series. So in this video, we're going to be styling a login and a registration form. So we have actually created a login and registration form in one of our previous videos. A link to that was going to be placed here. You could go watch that as well. And a link to the entire playlist will be placed on the description of this video. So in this particular video, we're going to be talking about how to style a form. So that's actually what we want to achieve. We want to learn how to style a form because the previous form we actually created with HTML alone wasn't really looking so good. So we actually want to learn how we could give this some styling and make them to look appealing to the eye. So let's get started with this. Hi guys, welcome back. So this is the form we created some time ago and we have it here. So we actually learned some certain things like how to make a date picker with the HTML date type, how to make a color picker as well, and so many other cool stuff over here. So in this video, we're going to be creating the login and register form using HTML and CSS this time around, and it's going to look actually much more better than this because this time around we're using CSS. So just so you know, we would be using the Unsplash image library over here. So Unsplash is basically a kind of a website with images. We have lots and lots of images over here, like the image of the sunflower. I could actually download it, and everything on Splash is actually free. So I could download it. It's of different sizes. I could decide to download the small sunflower over here. You can close this, and there's just so many other things you could do on Splash. I'm going to be placing a link to this website in the description of this video so that you can explore it and find out what you can do with it. So one of the things I love about Unsplash is actually the source.unsplash.com. So take those. This is unsplash.com and this is source.unsplash.com. So over here is like an API for us. So here we can actually generate a random image by copying on this link and pasting it over here. Click on enter. It's going to generate a kind of a random image. If I should paste that again, it will give us another image, and if I do that again, it will give us just another image. This time I give us same image, so this is another image. So that's how the Unsplash API works, and you can actually read up this documentation here to have more detail about it. So this time around, I wanted to show me only pictures of office. Only official pictures of office. So I'm going to copy this URL now, and I'm going to paste it over here, and this is definitely not a picture of an office. So I'm going to try again. Okay, this looked more like an office. Sometimes it just gives you wrong images irrespective of whether irrespective of the query you've added. Sometimes it may give you wrong images. So this is what I'm going to be using anyways. I'm going to be using this to generate image for this particular video. So now let's move back to our IDE and get started. So this is the code to the form we created earlier on, and this time around I'm going to be creating a new folder in our project. So I'm going to be creating a new folder and I'm going to call it auth. Auth is for authentication. So I want to create a login and a register, and I'll place everything on the auth folder, and I'll create an HTML file in there. I'll call this one login, and I'll just go ahead and create the second one. The second one, I'll call this one register. And I'm going to create the third file, and the third file I'm creating now is a CSS file, and I'll call this auth.css. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to give this title of login, or rather, let me call it CSS login, and I'm going to be including a link to this authentication style sheet. So we can actually do it this way using the link and all that, but there's a short way of doing it, and I'm just going to click and drag it over here. So I've actually added a link to this particular style sheet with this HTML document. So if I should save this now and open this on my browser, you would see that I don't really have anything going on here aside from the title of the HTML file, which is CSS login. Okay, that's been said, I'm going to do some certain things. The first thing I want to do is to make a div, and in my div now, I'm going to give this div a class of main, and that's the first thing I'm going to style. I'm going to give it a class of main, and I'll come over to my authentication, and I'll say to my auth.css, and I'll say .main, which is the class over here, and I'll say the background, I want to use a URL, then I'll move over to Unsplash to copy this URL that I said I'm going to use. So I'm going to paste this here. So in some cases, you can use a double quote or you could use a single quote, but I prefer using a single quote. So I'm just going to change that to a single quote, and I'll save this now. And another thing I want to do is to make sure that it has it should occupy the entire screen. So I'm going to say that its height, the height of this div should be 100 VH, whereby VH actually means the view height of the screen, and I want the width should also be 100 VW, that is view width, that it should take from this extreme to this other end over here. So I would save this, and I'll move back to my CSS, and I'll refresh this. Now this time around, you could see that we have a kind of an image automatically generated for us because of the background. I will say the URL should be the link to a particular image. Now if we refresh this again, we'll keep on getting different images. We'll refresh again, we get different image. And this is another image from Unsplash. So this is actually how Unsplash works. So there are more things I need to do here. The first thing I need to do is that I want my body. Before this, I'm going to say the body of this particular page shouldn't have any padding. That is, padding should be 0. I'm going to say the margin should also be 0. And the reason why I'm doing this is just so that this particular space between here would be removed. So if I should refresh this now and reload again, we could see that there is actually no space. We don't have all those spaces by the side anymore. So it's actually looking better this time around. So let's go on. There are more things we need to do. Now in this particular place, I'm going to create another div over here, and here I'm going to give this a class of login, and I'll save this, and I'll go back to my CSS, and I would say the class of login I actually want to place our login form somewhere around here, so it's going to just take a space around here. So to do that now, I'm going to say its width should be, let me give it a 300 pixels for now. I'm going to give it a 300 pixels, and its height should be, let's say, 600 pixels. So I'll save this. I'll give it a background color as well. Its background color should be white, definitely. So let's say the background should be white, and I'll save this. And I'll refresh this now. So we actually don't have that showing up anywhere around here. So save this, and let's look at what we've done wrong. We're going to inspect this now. And over here, we have our main. When we open our main, we have our, we actually have this over there. I never saw that. So it's actually over here. it's actually displayed over here. So we have this as our white login box, but this is actually too small. So let us still inspect this to actually find a good height for it, a good height and a good width for it. So let's say this is going to be this big. I'm actually increasing the width over here by pressing the top of my the arrow top button on my keyboard. So I'm going to make the width to be 500. I think that's going to be, let's say 450. 450 is fine. 450 should be fine. Okay, so this 450, let's change that now. The width is going to be 450. We'll save this and now we can refresh. Great, so we can see the box over here, but I really don't like the way it's displayed over here, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to be giving this a position of absolute. I'm going to give this a position of absolute, and it's going to have a top of, let's say for now, the top is going to be 200 pixels, and 200 pixels, and the right, that is the space by the top and the space by the right hand side. So the right now is going to be, let's say 100 pixels. So these are just random number. We're going to take a look at it and restyle it again. So I think I guessed right anyways. So now that we've done that, I'm going to be placing some kind of forms over here. So I'm going to say form, and over here I'm going to be adding an input and a label. So the first label I'm going to make is this. So this is my label, and I'm making this label for let's say the email. Let's say we need the email, and we call this email. I'll put a quote there, and I'll make the input, and it's of type email. It's going to be of type of an email. So the ID of this, the ID is going to be email as well. So now the label is now linked with this input successfully. And when we save this, we come over here, we refresh. We could see now we have this being showing over here. So let's just add what we want to add there. The next thing we're going to do is, first I'm going to be putting this in a kind of div. I'll wrap it with a div, so it's going to be within a block element, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to duplicate this now, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say password, and this time around I'll change the 4 to be password, and I'm just call it pass, and this would also be pass, and this is of type what? Password as well. So I'll save this and I'll refresh again, so we'll see what we have over there this time around. And the last thing I'm going to make here is actually a button. So I'll be putting this button in a div as well, and I'm going to say we can actually give a button a type, and we said the type of this button is submit actually, and here we could say login. We could then say login, and I'll save this now, and refreshing this, I have a button over there that's actually saying login. And when I click on login, it just refreshes the page. It does nothing actually, rather than refreshing the page. So let's go on. So let's go on over here. So we're going to create some kind of padding around this form now, and to do that, I'm going to take the login CSS property. Then I'm going to take the login CSS class rather. Then I'm going to say padding should be equal to 50 pixels, and that's going to create a space between them so that we don't just have the email address and the password. We don't just have it clustered into, we don't just have it so close to this particular box over there. So after that, I think this is actually too high, so I'm going to be reducing the height of this particular div. So to do that now, I'll come over here, I'll go to our main, and not the main rather, I'll come over here and I'll say this should be 400, while this should be, let's say 300, and I'll save this now, refresh this. Let's see. Okay, this looks a bit more better. This looks better. So now it's time for us to style these ones over there. So what we're going to do in this case now is we're going to say all the inputs. We're going to be using the input selectors, or we can actually add a class over here. We could add a class over here and we could say, let's just call it inputs, a class of inputs. So I'll come over here and I'll call this inputs. And I'm going to give it a display flex, and I would say justify content should be space between. I'm sure we should understand this by now, and when I refresh these we could see that they just go both ways. The email, this is actually the space between them this time around. So I'm going to use this class over here for this other div as well. So when we save this and we come over here, we'll refresh again, we could see that we have the form being aligned properly a bit, but there are actually no spacing between them. So I'll go back to this and I'm going to say that they should have a margin. We want a margin of 20 pixels, but no margin at the left and at the right. So I'm just going to leave it this way now. And if I refresh this, we could see that they now have a space between them. So that being said, I'm just going to increase the space to, let's say, 40 pixels for now. Okay, so that looks better with. So now it's time for us to style the inputs. So I'm going to say inputs. So take note, I'm actually using the element selector because I don't have a dot in front of it. I'm actually using the element selector this time around. So this is a class selector because of there's a dot, but this is an element selector because of there is no dot. So if we go back to our HTML, we are actually selecting this element called input and this element called input. So what we'll do now is we're going to say input should have a kind of a padding. Let's say it has a padding of 50 pixels. Let's just see what that will look like now. And you can see that this is looking too big right now. So I'm going to reduce this by inspecting it. So I'll come over here and let me enlarge this. So we can see that this is 50 pixels here. So I'm going to change this to like 20 pixels, and that is still too big, and I'll change it to 5 pixels, or let's say 10 pixels will look better with. So good. So let's use 8 pixels. Okay, so we're changing these to 8 pixels now. Change this to 8 pixels. We'll save this, we'll come over here, we'll refresh the page, and this is what we have over here. So now we can actually say we want our login button to take the full width, and it should just look a bit better. So we can come here and we'll use the element selector called button, and we'll say the button should take a width of 100%. Remember, when we say the width of 100%, we're not talking about 100% of the screen this time around, but 100% of this div. So when we refresh this now, we could see that our button is taking a width of 100%. We do not want our button to have a border, so we'll say the border should be none. The border should be none, and we want the color, that is the background color, should be let's just say blue. We've been using blue. So we're going to say the text color, that is just the ordinary color, should be white. And it should have a padding of, let's say, 10 pixels. So we just want our button to look a bit big, and that's what we have over here. So this is what our login form is gradually looking like. It may not be the best login form you've ever seen, but we're going to just stop here. And with this, I believe you have the idea of how to make great login forms. So before we go out of here, I just want to do one more thing. I actually want this div to have some kind of rounded corners. So to do that now, I'm going to say for the div, we actually call this div, I've forgotten the class name, so I'll just look it up. We call this login. So we'll go to this login here and we'll say that the border radius should be 20 pixels. We'll save this, we'll refresh, and we can now see that our form is having some kind of rounded edge over there. So there's still one more thing I would like us to do, and that is over here we have our form. I'm going to collapse this so that we can see more. This is our div container taking our form, which is actually this white part over here. So I want to do something, and I want to create another div over here, and I'll call this I'll give this a class of let me call this background. I'll call this background. Remember, this is a class name, and I'll come over here, then I'll say the background, not this bracket. We'll say the background should have a background color of black. But this time around, I want to make the black to be transparent. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select this transparency here. I'm going to make it to be a bit transparent. And now you could see that when we're talking about transparency CSS, we use the RGBA. So this gets converted to RGBA, and whereby this is the level of red, the level of green, and the level of blue in the color, and everything is actually 0. But the A is actually the transparency. So how transparent do I want it to be? I want it to be 0.2 transparent. If I should save this now, we won't see much difference until I give it a height and the width as well. So I'm going to give it the same height and width I gave to our main class. And when I put this over there, save this, come over here and refresh. Now you would notice that we actually have a kind of an overlay over here. So first, let's make this to be 9. So to be 0.9 rather. When we save this now and we refresh this, you could see that it's actually having this kind of a black transparent overlay across our background image, and by so doing, it's actually placing the focus of this application to this box over there. So I'm going to reduce this to 0.5 right now. So you should take note, 0 is the lowest. 0 means that there is no transparency, while 1 means that there is absolute. 0 means that it is extremely transparent, that is, it's crystal clear, while 1 means that there is no transparency. So I'll leave this as 5 for now, and I will refresh this. So you could see we don't have those whites coming out anymore. Now I'm going to come over here and I'll select that div. If I should remove the div of the background now, we could see that this white is actually coming out. If I should undo that, we can see the difference. So that is actually what our overlay is doing. It's actually bringing the focus to this box over here. So that being said, I would still like to add one more thing as well. So, and what I would like to add is actually called a shadow. So in our login div over here, I would like to add a shadow. So I'm going to say box shadow. So that's just the short form. You can see me typing shadow. So I will just say box shadow should be 2. I'm just going to use some random numbers for now. 2 pixels, and I'm going to say another 2 pixels, and I would say black for now, just to make it obvious. So if I should save this and I refresh this now, you could see that we have a kind of a drop down over here. If I should increase this value, or I'll do that from the developer tool, so we can see that in real time. So when I select this and I increase this value over here, you could see that we have this kind of shadow effect coming out more and more when I increase the third one. So the third one is like it's actually like the real shadow, right? This two is actually like what direction should the shadow go to. So if we should increase this now, we can see that the shadow is coming down, and when we increase this, we could see that the shadow is moving to the right hand side. If we should decrease this to a negative value, the shadow will be moving to the left hand side, and if we should decrease this to a negative value as well, the shadow would be moving to the top. So that's just how it works. So in most cases, I like keeping this as 0, this also as 0, so that the shadow would just be immediately behind the div. Then I'm going to increase this, that is what I call the actual shadow effect. I'm going to increase it, and now you could see that we have some kind of a shadow effect over there. So I don't want this to be black, because black on black may not really look so good. I want this to be white. So you could see the shadow effect. If I should remove it, I remove it, add it, remove it, add it, so you can see the difference now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these properties from here, and I'm going to replace it with what we have over here. So I'm just going to give this 100 anyways, and I'll save this and refresh now. So now you can see that we have a kind of shadow for our login form, and our login form is actually looking better off. So there are actually more things we could do here as well. There are more things we could do for the background. We could say that the background should stay at the center. Well, we save that now and refresh. So you could see that this is the first image here, and it's actually at the center of our page over there. And if we do not want it to repeat, we could also say that no repeat. And when we do this now, we refresh, we could see that we have this picture over here, and it is not repeating, like there's no repetition in the background image over here. But I actually want it to repeat so that it could take the whole full width. So I'm going to remove this no repeat that is actually over here, and I'll save this. So now we could see. So this is just what our login form looks like. So I'm going to add one more thing so that we can just do almost same thing for our registration form. So for the registration form, I'm first going to create a link over here. I'm going to create a link, and this time around I'll say div, and I'm just going to give this, and I'll say this goes to the register.html, and I would say click here to register. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this now, and I'll come over here, refresh this, and that's what we have here. So we can see that this is actually a link saying click here to register. I would give this a class of click here. So I'll come back to this page now, and now I'm going to say dot click here. First, I want the text should be at the center. And I also want to give it a padding of 50 pixels. And when we refresh this now, we could see that we have click here to register. But I really do not like this color. And if we change the color from here, it may not really have any effect. So when we change the color to let's say black, and we refresh this page, you could see that this is not really affecting the text in there because this is a hyperlink. So how do we take care of that? I'm going to remove this now, and I'm going to say click here, dot click here. Remember what we talked about, the greater than symbol. So we're going to say dot click here dot a. Now a is actually an element. Now I have actually selected the element a over here. Then I'm going to say whenever we have click here, whenever we have an anchor tag, which is the A element. Whenever we have an anchor tag inside of a click here class, we should apply the CSS rule. And now I want the color should be black. Now this is going to work. And when we refresh this, we could see that the color is now black. And I'm going to say that the text decoration should be none. So this is actually going to remove the underline that we have over there. So we just simply say click here to register. But actually, I think I like it with the underline, so I'm just going to remove this click here to register. I'm going to remove the I'm just going to remove the text decoration over here. So I'll be removing that, and this is what we have now. If I should refresh this, this is exactly what we have. So I'm going to click on this image now, on this link now, and it's taking us to our register.html. So that's great. So let's move over to the registration.html, and we'll name this CSS register, and we're actually going to use same thing. If we should refresh this now, you can see the CSS register over here, and we're going to import this same authentication style sheet. So this is for you to know that you can actually use one CSS style for different HTML documents. So I'm going to save this now. There will be not much difference over here. So what I'm going to do is I will go back to our login. For the sake of time, I'm going to copy everything we have within the body over here, within the body section. I'm going to copy everything. So I just minimized that and I copied it, and I'm going to paste that over here. So I will expand that again, and this time around, let's just see what we have. So you could see that we have almost same thing with our login form. So I'm going to change some certain things here. So, or rather add some certain things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I will duplicate this now twice. So we have email twice, and the first thing I'm going to do here is I'll call this a name. So while we're registering, we'll be needing the username. We'll say full name. Let's say full name, and here we'll say name. And this time around, we'll call this one here username, and I'm going to call this, give it the same ID, and I'll call this over here username. So this is not of a type email, this will be of a type text, and this would also be of a type text as well. And now we have the full name, we have the username, and we have the the email. Well, I'm also going to, for the password now, I'm going to ask them to enter the password twice. I'll duplicate this and I'll tell them to enter the password twice. So why this is called password and this ID is password, we cannot have two elements with the same ID. So I'm going to change this to pass2, and I will also change it here again to be a pass2. And I'll call this one, I'll say password2. Let me just call this password2. Or let's say password again. We're going to call this password again. We'll save this, and now let's take a look at what we have over here. So we could see we have our form over here, and this time around our form is looking, it's not really looking so good. So we're going to increase the height of this card this time around. So remember, we are actually doing this from the login class, but if we should change the height from this particular point, it is going to affect the height of the login form as well. So that's not what we want to do. So because of that, we are going to come over here to our register.html. Then we're going to use an inline styling to override what had already been declared here. So we're going to say that the height should be 600 pixels, and the width should be 450 pixels. The width should be 450 pixels. So I'm going to save this now. And I come over here, we'll refresh this. So now you can see that this is actually looking a bit bigger. So the width is actually kind of too large in my opinion. So I'm going to say the width should just be 350 pixels. So let's refresh this. Okay, I'm not sure that got saved. We'll refresh this now. So, okay, so this is it. So this is over here. Then we're going to raise this up a bit. So over here in the login, we said that the top is 200, but this time around we are going to say that the top should be 150 pixels. So I'm going to say top should be 150 pixels, and I'll save this, come over here and refresh this. So this is actually looking better, but this text here is just misleading. So I'm going to change this to click here to login. So over here now, I'll come and I'll say click here to login, and I'll change this to be login.html. So when we save this and we refresh this now, we could say login.html. We click on it, it takes us to the login page. We come over here, click on this, takes us to the registration page. So that's just actually how it works, and this is a sample this is a way whereby we could create a sample login and registration form using HTML and CSS, and how we can use the Unsplash image library. So you can see that our text box is actually looking better than what we have here before. Our button is actually looking better than what we have here before. So that's it for this video. If this video was helpful to you, press a like. If you like what we're doing over here, subscribe to our channel. So that's it for now. Have a great day.